What they were actually doing was building tiny houses that they could drop in the back of homes to serve as an accessory dwelling unit that you could put on the platform and rent out as an Airbnb. Factory built houses, making them super energy efficient. It was a very interesting job.
Airbnb co-founder Joe Gebbia sold more than $1 billion of his stock, and they spun it out as a sort of business, which I presume Joe runs. I remember when you took the job at Airbnb, just thinking, now there's a departure in activity. Can you talk about the foray into tech culture?
Yeah, that was a shocker. In 2019, as I said, I'm always really curious and I like to learn things. And I saw it was just a random job. I've always been an independent contractor and worked for myself most of my career. And I saw this random job for Airbnb and I was like, what the heck is Airbnb doing hiring a solar engineer? And I applied almost just out of curiosity to find out what they were doing. I thought, oh, well, maybe they're going to put solar on Airbnbs. Maybe they're just going to become a project developer because they have this, easy way to sell solar to people who are hosting.
Totally.
And that turned out to be not at all what they were doing. So what they were actually doing was building tiny houses that they could drop in the back of homes to serve as an accessory dwelling unit that you could put on the platform and rent out as an Airbnb. And so they called me back and they said, oh, come in for an interview. That's when I found out what they were really doing. And I was like, oh, well, that actually sounds way more interesting because we can build a ground from the house up. Yeah. Factory built houses, making them super energy efficient, figuring out how they can be off grid or grid tied. So it was a very interesting job.
Fascinating. So you spent 3 years helping Airbnb as they were also, as we now know, lobbying hard for this ADU law in California that very much benefits Airbnb over other kinds of housing. That is fascinating. Anything that you learned in that process that surprised you about kind of how the industry works, or maybe even how sort of politics or sort of getting policies to go your way? Like, what revelations did you glean from the experience?
I was pretty removed from the policy team. Yeah. And the group I was in was called Samara. And Samara actually got spun out as an independent company. And so Airbnb is no longer making the tiny houses, but Samara is still making the tiny houses. And I think they are amazingly awesome. I think we had really, really good architects and
that's so cool.
Industrial designers.
Yeah. SAMARA.com, Samara.
Yep. And I think they are beautiful. And I think what I learned the most there was how to work within a team who doesn't always agree about what the mission or the goals are, because we had architects who were really just worried about the houses being beautiful and easy to live in and easy to host and easy to be a guest in. And my little team was more worried about energy consumption and energy production. So how can we get the most solar on the building? How can we lower the energy consumption to the lowest values? And so trying to fit all those pieces together to have a beautiful, functional, tiny house that also is extraordinarily energy efficient is pretty hard. So it was definitely a learning experience.
So I didn't know the story, but as you've been explaining it, I did a quick search, and Airbnb co-founder Joe Gebbia sold more than $1 billion of his stock after netting $3 billion to start Samara, and they spun it out as a sort of business, which I presume Joe runs. Yeah,
Joe, and also interestingly, the president of Samara now is a guy named Mike McNamara, who came from Flextronics.
Oh wow!
So high-powered executive team, Joe Gebbia and Mike McNamara. So Mike has a really deep background in manufacturing.
Yeah,
so pretty interesting.
Fascinating. That is fascinating. What an interesting foray for you into the corporate world. Much different experience, I'm sure. But still tied to the original sort of beginnings of your career in your own off-grid home. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I've always really enjoyed the construction industry, not just solar and electrical, but seeing how houses are built.